lot of this. I really wish that Governor Gary Johnson had been on that stage as well.
Yeah.
We really do have ideas that are different. No, and honestly, you hear them both. They're pandering to the middle class. How many times did you hear the word middle class said? They know politically that the middle class is strong, and that's probably going to swing the election. So that's what they're talking about. And they also, how many folks feel that they, any of them, have a plan to really assist in bringing back jobs to the United States? A lot of talk, but I didn't see any hands here, and I didn't see any ideas there. And it's amazing because they can nibble at the edges. You heard them talking about tax breaks here and a little tax incentives there, but that's pretty much it. What Governor Johnson will do is it's an institutional change, and it's exciting. And only we as libertarians will be able to bring it about. And what is it? Like I tried to say earlier, we will repeal the income tax. Now that's not a soundbite deal because it takes a little explanation. But today, our goods, our manufactured goods, our agricultural goods have an artificial disadvantage because before they leave our shores as exports, they pay taxes on them. The companies that pay taxes, it has to be incorporated into the prices of goods. The payroll tax is the same. And then they're competing with goods around the world that have not paid taxes on them, so our goods are artificially higher. Same thing in reverse. If you have goods from around the world, Singapore, Argentina, Japan, wherever, coming into our country as exports, they have not paid taxes on them, competing with our goods that have, and then all of them pay the same sales taxes. If we were to repeal the income tax and go to a retail consumption tax, it would level the playing field, and then all of the goods would pay the same amount of taxes on them. I was in an airplane not long ago. I'm doing a lot of flying, as you can imagine. And there was a man, an executive from Nike, sitting next to me. We had this discussion, and his eyes got really big. And he said, Judge Gray, you must understand, if we were to repeal the income tax, most companies would bring their manufacturing back to the United States of America. That's called millions of jobs. It's called a reverse outsourcing. You can pass all the laws you want to. You need an institutional change that will do this. So that's really exciting stuff. We would have a retail consumption tax. People are concerned about the poor, so is Governor Johnson. And by the way, I will be the first Peace Corps volunteer to be elected to national office. I care about people, and I'm proud of that. But we will also have, for example, if the retail consumption tax were 10%, it'd probably be between 8% and 12%. Governor Johnson would have a rebate to every adult in our country every month of, say, $100. That means that if you spend $1,000 a month on goods and services, you'll end up paying no taxes. Obviously, if you spend less than that, if you're really poor, you'll make money on the deal. And then for every dollar you spend over $1,000, yes, you'll pay 10% of the retail consumption tax. We would abolish the IRS. Imagine the amount of administrative costs, bureaucracy, fraud that we would get away from. Today, the Bureau of General Accountability estimates that we spend somewhere between $260 and $600 billion every year just by keeping tax records and actually preparing our income taxes. All of that would be saved. So those are things that cry out to be discussed as well. Who doesn't care about this idea? Tax accountants, tax attorneys. H&R Block does not like this argument. I understand. People that work for the IRS, they're going to be out of a job. We're not going to share crocodile tears for that either. But the members of Congress are the ones that do not want this to happen. Why? The Republicans and Democrats in Congress, because they get enormous political power by voting for tax breaks for their wealthy constituents. They don't want to give it up. And neither Romney nor Obama would be able to overcome that. But when we win this election, we'll get such a mandate from you, the voters, that we'll be able to go over the heads of the members of Congress, and we'll be able to show you, if your member of Congress does not vote for this, he or she is putting their interests ahead of yours. Talk to them. We will bring this home. Education. Let me ask you a question. Just think, ponder about this. Who is in a better position to decide where and how your children should be educated? You as the parents or the federal government? I think that's an easy question to answer. And today, the parents have no say whatsoever about where and how their education dollar would be spent. So I disagree with Mr. Obama completely. The federal government should not be involved in education at all. It should be the parents and the school districts, and bring it down to that level. Why? The shoes on your feet, what's he talking about? The shoes on your feet are consumer items. You basically decide where you want to go to buy your shoes, what style, what type, and about how much you want to spend. And you pretty much are comfortable with the decision you made. Like all your purchasing, your automobile, whatever, it's purchased from the bottom up, from the consumer. Education is completely the opposite. It's funded from the top down. Federal government has a whole bunch of money. They keep a bunch for administration. The Department of Education has something in the order of 4,600 employees, big bureaucracy. Then they give it to the states. They keep some for administration. Give it to the school district. They keep some for administration. Comes to the schools, which the public schools are all top-heavy in administration, and the parents don't get to have that choice. What happens if the parents can choose? They will demand excellence. And if I have a school and I'm not performing, you'll come to me, maybe you'll do me the service of saying, come on, Greg, get it together. You're not teaching well, but pretty soon they'll start going to the neighboring school that's doing better. What am I going to do? I'm going to look around and say, wait, my customers are leaving. I'm going to go out of business unless I get better. So I will get better, or if I don't, I will go out of business. Then what will happen? What's your name?
Joseph.
Joseph will come in and he'll put in a school here, and Joseph will have a lot more innovation. Joseph will use more of the internet. Joseph will go through these things and will actually put in a school that works. Competition will do this. Milwaukee, I was in Milwaukee about 2 weeks ago. They have used this system for 4 or 5 years. And they looked at it and said, Judge Gray, we've gotten rid of all of our bad schools now because the parental choice is able to work. Same amount of funding is used, but parents get to choose. And they can choose a private school, a public school, even a religious school, a military school, whatever they choose. Public schools will have a leg up because they're already up and running. Teachers will love this. No, good teachers will love this. Why? Because they'll be in demand. And if I have a good teacher and I'm not paying her enough, Joseph will come in and say, lure her away and pay her more money. Good teachers today in schools, what? They see all the money into administration. So the better teachers actually go out of teaching into administration. That will be different. Poor teachers, a lot of them have been beaten up by this system. They know full well they'll get the same amount of money whether they put into it and teach well or they don't. And so a lot of them will start teaching well. It's the poor teachers that will not do well in this, and they should find a different line of work. So we believe in this education. I agree with Mr. Romney. He was talking about vouchers and talking about parental choice. It works. It's what we need to do. If there are questions coming along, I'd much prefer to actually talk about what you would like to talk about. Yes, in the very back.
Yes, I believe that in order for a school to be good, the students have to want to teach. And yet I also understand there are students that are going to high school that really don't understand the subjects and really are not meant to cut out for college. As president, will Gary Johnson actually say, you know what, if you are good in the vocational job schools, and will they get more vocational job training if they don't show well in the academic degree?
Of course. Not everybody needs to have a PhD in psychiatry. Not everybody needs to be a medical doctor. Some would like to be aircraft mechanics. Some people would like to play the cello. If they have desires to get into trade schools, if that's what their line of work is, if you have the money there, because the vouchers will be able to be spent for the trade schools, they will be innovative, they will be able to design classes. If there are enough people that want to go into these trade schools, Joseph will put in a trade school, or so on. The answer is yes, in the back, yes.
Some of your ideas are good, Libertarian, Green Party, all this does not matter until you take money out of politics. What do you think about Citizens United?
What do I think about Citizens United? It was an atrocity. Next question. No. It is simply wrong. I don't know how Justice Scalia was considering this. Yes, the 14th Amendment says that a corporation is a person for purposes of taxes, but corporations can't vote. Corporations can't run for office. There's a difference between a flesh and blood person and a corporate person. And he really missed the boat on that. I would not have, if I could do this, would not have any companies, corporations, unions, non-human entities giving any money to any political type of war. Why? Because corporations are spending their shareholder money. That means they should get unanimous approval of the shareholders before they spend that money. And if they can get that approval, terrific. Let the shareholders spend their own money. Same thing with unions. The union members should have to be polled and agree that any of this money should be spent for whatever political usage. If they're interested in doing that, terrific. Let them spend their own money. The The problem is, now the United States Supreme Court has said that this is constitutional, so we're going to really have to work on it. Did I not answer your question?
No, I just wanted to say, so your citizens are not people, my friend, right?
Corporations
are not people, my friend.
Private entities are people for purposes of taxation under the 14th Amendment, but they're not people with regard to anything
Well,
else.
that's what Romney said, citizens, corporations are people, my friend.
Yes. Other questions? Yes, sir.
All right, so you guys weren't able to get in this debate
Not so far.
because the Republicans and the Democrats froze you out.
Yes.
So if Governor Johnson is elected president, how's he going to get anything done?
Oh, we will put it, this is something that is an ace in the hole, a trump card that we have that the Republicans and Democrats do not, and the people will not only crave, they will demand if we are seen as viable, because this is exactly what they want. We will put in a coalition government. We will have a government, yes, of libertarians and independents, highly placed in our administration, but also Republicans and Democrats, as long as they buy into our approach of financial responsibility and social tolerance. If they do, we will have Republicans and Democrats highly placed in our administration. And then when we have all of this bipolar politics going on, this selfish politics going on in Washington today, with the Republicans, with the Democrats, we'll have some of their colleagues go out and talk, hey, come on guys, get on board. This is a good idea. We will give credit to anybody that has a good idea, anybody that embraces a good idea, regardless of political party. We will be able to do this. They can't, they're not interested, they won't, we will. The people are fed up, and they will come with us if we're seen as viable. You get us in these debates, I truly believe that we will be the odds-on favorite of winning this election. Not being in the debates was crucial for us. And in fact, you have to understand it was brilliant how the Republicans and Democrats got together. They say they have differences, but I tell you one thing that they really feel they have the same is they don't want a third party in this election. They took this over. They took it over from the League of Women Voters. And it was so crass that the League of Women Voters issued a public statement when they removed their name because they would not be a part of, quote, the hoodwinking of America. They would not lend their names to this. Now, the Republicans and Democrats actually in the Presidential Debates Commission made a mistake, which they quickly cured. Back in 1992, that was the last time that they had any third-party vote or any third-party voice in the debates. That was Ross Perot. He was invited to participate in the debates when he was polling at 7%. He ended up getting 19% of the vote, and actually he stayed out of the campaign. He dropped out for about 3 weeks for reasons I never understood. And you can just see what happened thereafter. Republicans and Democrats got together, highly placed are running this organization. And they got together and said, boy, we don't want to do that again. And so what they've done is increase the bar so it's completely unattainable. They say that you have to have an average of 5 national polling groups at 15% polling nationwide. Now look, Governor Johnson hasn't even been carried in 5 national polling groups, and they don't even tell us which ones they are until the end. So we tried to make that. We were polling about 5 or 6%. We figured when Ron Paul supporters would come aboard, we would figure when actually the Tea Party people would see that we really do stand against crony capitalism, or we're not going to give money to farmers for not raising corn, or give money to oil companies for drilling for oil. We don't believe in crony capitalism. We believe that the government should stay out of the marketplace. That would bring in a lot of Tea Party supporters, a lot of the Move On movement, the Occupy movements, where we really will get our troops out of all of these military fights all around the world. We will get out of, not in a year, not in 2 years of Afghanistan, we will get our troops out of Afghanistan now. People will do that. I am the only one of the 6 of us running for president or vice president that's actually served in the military. And in fact, it's a rather unusual story. I was actually awarded a combat action ribbon on a training cruise. Between my 2nd and 3rd year of law school, I was sent to the rivers of Vietnam. A boat or a ship received a combat action ribbon. I have seen what happens when you put troops into harm's way where they're not well equipped. That will not happen under administration. But we will. It's amazing. They talked about the budget. They didn't talk about Paul Ryan's supposedly radical budget. Paul Ryan obviously is the Republican nominee for vice president. This radical budget that he has proposed will not balance the budget for 28 years, assuming some growth that may or may not be there. We will submit a balanced budget to Congress now. Now, you must understand, particularly most everybody here is younger, particularly. You don't understand what's happening. For every dollar today that the federal government is spending, we're borrowing 43 cents. Think of that. No company could possibly do this and stay in existence. No household could possibly do this and not face bankruptcy. And let me tell you a secret, no country can either. We are Greece, folks, and it's my generation that has done this. Deeply sorry to have to say that. My generation has made a financial mess of this, and it's my children's generation that's going to have to pay it back, and my grandchildren are bankrupt as we speak. And if you don't participate in this election now, you're crazy for your own financial future, for the own future of our country. So we can talk about, Mr. Obama really has increased the national debt by $6 trillion in 4 years. $6 trillion in 4 years. It was $10 trillion when he took over, and I agree, he took it over. Probably our country was in worse shape than any president ever taking over the reins of government except Abraham Lincoln when he took it over. I will acknowledge that. And he did get us out pretty well from Iraq, which we never should have gone into in the first place, but he hasn't gotten us out of Afghanistan, even though he says he will. But what he has done in tinkering in this market, he should have left the market alone. The problem with this whole bank problem issue, banking scandals, and the real estate tumble was the government. They didn't talk about this, but they should. Why? Oh, they blame the banks, and of course there's lots of blame to go along. And I'm a bank, okay? And I'm going to decide, wait a minute, you come in with a risky loan. We can see that you're not qualified, but the loan is insured by the government. So I'll give you your loan, even though it's pretty clear you're not going to be able to make the payments. Now, what's your name?
Jonathan.
Jonathan's here. He's a bank, and he's responsible. So you go to Jonathan's bank, and he says, no, I'm sorry, you're not qualified for this loan. I'm not going to give it to you. So you come to the gray bank, and I do. What's going to happen pretty soon? My shareholders are happy because we're making all this money guaranteed by the government. Jonathan's bank over here, his shareholders are upset. Look at what's going on. Why aren't you making money like Gray is? So pretty soon you start giving out these loans too. It was all caused by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, who insured these loans. If you don't have a risk, why not give the loans? And then we have a compounded problem, because anybody could take this one loan and see, they call it a toxic loan. It's underwater. You don't have the income, the housing rates have gone down, there's more owed on the property than it's worth. We take one of those, nobody would buy this loan. But we put 10,000 of them together and we call it a security, and the SEC, the Securities Exchange Commission, gave it a top rating and sold it as a security. Boy, I tell you, the government of Iceland made an enormous problem. They believed us, and they bought it, and they went bankrupt because of it. It's caused by government. I'm not saying that there wasn't enough room around to share, but it was really caused by government. We must go back to separating banks from the securities trading on the one hand, get rid of that, and just have banks go back to banks. Mr. Obama did say one good thing tonight. He said we need to have them hold more collateral instead of getting the collateral so low and loaning out all this money. We need to bring that financial responsibility back. These are things that we will do. One of our slogans are fine for sound bites, but this one is accurate. You look at our campaign literature, wherever it is, it's not pizza, wherever it is, and it will say, good government is easy. Watch. That's what Governor Gary Johnson actually did as governor of New Mexico, and it's exactly what we'll do as president of the United States. Other questions? There must be. Yes.
Okay, so
The prudent banker's question, I hear it.
on the subject of the economy, the Libertarian stance on the economy is enacting the fair tax, right? The 23% consumption tax, right?
The way we would foster jobs in our country is to go with what I call a retail consumption tax, abolish the IRS, abolish the income tax, and go with the retail consumption tax. You can call it a fair tax, you can call, I don't care what you call it. It's going to be a critically important decision to make. We should all agree to abolish the IRS, to abolish the income tax, and we'll put our heads together and come up with the best thing that will work.
Okay, so my question is, there's a lot of controversy on whether or not that's a good thing or not, with a lot of different sources saying
Let's talk
yes and
about
no.
it. It's a hugely
A lot
important
of
issue.
different sources saying no.
Fine.
So my question is, if it is enacted and it turns out to be a total mistake, are Governor Johnson and yourself are willing to say, this didn't work, let's try something else?
Oh, I hope you heard his question. If for some reason we put in this and it turns out to be a mistake, are we willing to say that was a mistake and put in something else? The answer, of course, is yes. But that's again why it's going to be a huge decision. We're going to get in lots of information. Let me stop for a second and tell you. When Governor Johnson asked me to be his running mate, I said, yes, I will on one condition. And the condition is that we run to win. He completely agrees. And now what I'm talking about, he went on to say something that really shocked me. I have never heard of any presidential candidate saying this before. He said, he volunteered this, Jim, throughout the campaign, if your ideas are different than mine, feel free to discuss them publicly. I don't believe that Barack Obama said that to Joe Biden. The reason I bring that up now is Governor Johnson wants to get as much accurate information as he can. And if for some reason I have a better idea than he does, he wants to hear it. So we want to bring in information. I don't care where it comes from. And if for some reason what we're doing isn't working, absolutely, we will change it. But this is a really important thing to look at. Yes?
How much?
No, I'm sorry. This one.
Thanks, Jim. I'm from Nevada, born state. I like a good, tough president. I love a great, vice president, that can really deal with all of our senators in Congress. I believe, the Libertarian Party can do a lot of good in the U.S. Senate. You'd be the president of the U.S. Senate if you become the vice president of the United States of America.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to people like Dick Cheney, the owner of Halliburton, making all that war, all that mess, everything, and we never talk about the judicial branch of our government pinning the Bush administration to the wall for all the austerity that they've done, the drone killings, and the Geneva Convention ban. I mean, I love a good, strong fight. I mean, I signed up for the military when I was a young man, and you know what? I didn't go into the lines. What would you do as vice president?
That's a big question. It's funny because libertarians are considered to be closer aligned to Republicans because most people focus on our financial responsibility part. But we are equally close to Democrats. We are coming at Obama from the left. People don't focus on this. We are classic liberals. You mentioned drones.
Yeah.
When Governor Johnson and I both were in Tampa a couple of days before the Republican National Convention, celebrating Ron Paul and encouraging his family to come to ours, so we're all the same family. The reason I'm bringing that up now is that there was a headline, front page in the Tampa newspaper, saying that the Obama administration has acknowledged that they're not going to have drones flying over Tampa during the Republican convention. Well, does that mean that's an exception? Normally they would. This is an incredible invasion of our privacy. We say, mark my words, that we will not have drones flying over the United States of America unless there's a judicial warrant.
With the judicial branch of the government, and what would you do as the vice president of the United States of America, under the Libertarian Party, I mean, with the brutality of the Zeta gangs, I mean, the Mexican cartels, I mean, the way the mobsters and the bad guys are operating these days, the judicial branch of the American government has more people in incarceration than they do in freedom. We're talking about our population being 50 million people watching, 40 million people watching. We're a nation of 350 million people, and it seems like a quarter of us are in the incarceration system.
Well, that's not the judicial's fault, but I mean they're required. They don't pass mandatory minimums, but I swore to uphold the laws, so if I would have to give a mandatory minimum, I would. Nevertheless, the United States of America, like you say, leads the world in the incarceration of our people. We have 5% of the world's population and 25% of the prisoners. There is a U.S. senator, who's now retiring, named Jim Webb from Virginia. And he looked at those statistics, get you first. He looked at those statistics and said, either we're the most evil people in the world or we're doing something wrong. Which do you think it is? It's intolerable what we're doing. I say from California, because that's my home state, we have tens of thousands of people right this minute in state prison that should not be there. You know, nonviolent drug offenders, geriatrics, people that have been sentenced to 15 years to life that the parole department doesn't let them out even with a reasonable hearing after 25 years. It's simply wrong from everyone's standpoint except the prison guards union. They're thriving. So we are going to turn these things around. Mandatory minimum sentencing is wrong. 3 strikes and you're out sentencing is wrong. We have even taken a position, contrary to Obama and Romney, we've taken a position in California against the death penalty. There's Proposition 34 in California that would convert death penalty sentences, all of them, down to life without possibility of parole. We stand on that. The death penalty is wrong. We couldn't even be in the European Union if we had a death penalty. It's simply wrong. They're on one side, we're on the other. They are putting our troops in harm's way of military conflicts all around the world. If there's a security threat to our country, fine, boy like thunder. If somebody attacks us or our allies, I promise you they'll wish they had not. But otherwise, we're going to declare peace. They are talking, Romney and Obama are talking about bombing Iran, going to war with Iran. We say, no, unless Iran attacks us or our allies, we will not attack Iran. Romney and Obama are here. They're so much alike, we call them Robamian. They really are the same, and we are on the other side. War on drugs, same deal. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you talked about drones on the domestic scale, but I want to know about drones on the foreign level, how you feel about this war on terror and preemptive strikes and on Al-Qaeda members in countries like Yemen and Pakistan, and using drones as a method of basically a preemptive strike to prevent terror.
There is no, she's asking about Al-Qaeda and around the world and the war on terrorism and the rest. There is no question but what there are people in this world that want to do bad things to good people. And there's no question but what there's some radical, in this case, Muslims. There have always been radical people in the world. You cannot declare war upon an idea. You can't successfully. The war on poverty, the war on drugs, drugs is just a thing. You can't do it. Our government is trying intentionally to keep us in fear, and it's wrong. Our government is trying intentionally to keep people, young and old, dependent on the government, and it doesn't work. So I am here to say that, yes, I believe in government without question. I do not want the state of Nevada to have a treaty with Italy. No, that's a federal issue. I don't want the state of Nevada to be sending troops off to fight in anywhere. That's a federal issue. But I believe in lesser government. I believe in less intrusive government. And when it comes to the safety net, I was in the Peace Corps, remember? I care about people, but government is the last resort instead of the first resort. With Obama, clearly government is the first resort. He was asked about education. Oh yes, all these harms of the world and the federal government should be involved. The answer is no. The answer is no. We will have government as a last resort instead of the first resort. The parents are the first resort. They'll use that funding, but the parents are the first resort. The individual is the first resort. So it's a major different focus. Obama is pandering to people with our money, you know, with regard to these things. So you're going to bring me back to what are we going to do about Yemen? Because there are some bad things going on. Yemen is becoming a failed country. Certainly the Sudan is becoming a failed government. You do not see people in Libya, for example, well, that's a slightly different circumstance. You don't see people in Libya saying, I hate Japan, and attacking the Japanese embassy and tearing down their flag, etc. We put ourselves in front of all of this stuff, and that's why we are getting the heat of a lot of these things. We cannot be the world's policeman. And I will tell you, even though Al-Qaeda exists, and they do some bad things, Turkey has fully as much a reason to be concerned about Al-Qaeda as we do. So does Russia, so does Japan, so does England. Why are we always putting ourselves out there? And besides, we can't afford it. So we will be participating in the world community. If anybody attacks us or our allies, if anybody attacks our security interests, the Straits of Hormuz would probably be one of those issues. We would use our military, but otherwise we're going to bring them home. And it troubles me no end that Mr. Obama has elected himself to be the executioner of people all around the world with drones. And as I understand it, he himself approves targets before we actually assassinate them from the air by firing a drone at them. And they're in a car, and of course there are 4 other people in the car, they're just collateral damage. The answer is that's not what we are about. We don't do that. And I stand on that proposition. Yes, did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Yes.
Just like
It's okay to applaud if you wanted to. I had something.
What do you think about Syria? Like, people are getting killed there every
Yes.
day, and what do you think if you become vice president or something?
We cannot effectively enter into these other issues. I wish that everything were wonderful in the world. You know, we aggravate the problems more than we help, and we simply cannot do it. And you can go and look at Libya. You know, we took out Muammar Gaddafi. You know, by the way, he was one of the success stories. We never should have gone into Iraq. I said publicly, before we went into Iraq, if we do this without...
Correction, Jim, Libyans killed there.
I don't mean Libya, Syria. Okay. At any rate, we go into Iraq, it'll be the biggest mistake of my lifetime. Gaddafi then actually was the only success basically out of Iraq because he turned away from his nuclear weapons. So what happened? The thanks he got is we took him out. I mean, so that the answer is make friends with the United States and they'll knife you in the back. We can't do this. We can no longer do this. Iran has a legitimate gripe with us. 1959, we actually overthrew the democratically elected government of Iran and installed the Shah of Iran. They don't like that idea much, and that idea still stays. We're not good at it, we're not effective at it, we can't afford it, we're not the world's policeman, and we're not going to enter into these areas. Yes?
Yeah, I noticed that Romney and Obama didn't really expound on individual liberties very much, especially like women's right to choose or gay marriage or personal drug use, that sort of thing. I was wondering if you could expound a bit on Governor Johnson's platform.
Yes. Yes. In fairness to them, by the way, one thing that really stayed with me, I've been a judge for 25 years. Jim Laird did not do a good job tonight, you know. Maybe that wasn't the idea, but there's one thing you can do, is just turn down the microphones after 2 minutes. He says 2 minutes. I think it was 15 minutes, now your 2 minutes is up. But at any rate, but in fairness to them, they weren't asked about that subject yet. They probably will be in other things. Barack Obama, again, is simply pandering to voters. Now, you may remember, he had his vice president, Joe Biden, go on Meet the Press. And Joe Biden kind of allowed us to how, well, maybe I'm reconsidering the whole issue of gay marriage. And I'm not speaking for the administration, but I'm kind of, maybe I could change my mind a little bit. And then they waited, put their finger to the wind. Was there any bad result to this? And so there wasn't. So 2 days later, Obama came out and said, you know, I'm kind of changing my mind too, that maybe gay marriage is okay, we shouldn't prohibit it, but it's a state issue. Well, translation, he doesn't have to do anything. And then 2 days after that, as you'll remember, he went to George Clooney's house in Beverly Hills and got $15 million from a lot of gay lesbian people, actually in Hollywood. He made $15 million at that. But he doesn't have to do anything. If he really believed it, he would have done this years ago. He hasn't. Governor Gary Johnson believes that marriage equality is the next step in the progression. There was first racial equality, then there was gender equality, now there's marriage equality. It's a constitutional issue. We stand on it. It's on our website. We will actually use it. So you can agree with us or disagree with us, but we won't pander to people. They'll know where we stand, and that's where we stand. Let's see, anybody that's not, yes?
Yeah, so the Patriot Act and the National Defense Authorization Act has pretty much support from both sides of the aisle. If elected, how the Johnson and Gray administration get rid of that?
Well, we will go publicly. Of course, we can't, like Obama has actually repealed a lot of laws himself, which is unconstitutional. We would repeal the Patriot Act without question. In fact, I was a lifelong Republican until the passage of the so-called Patriot Act. I voluntarily left the Republican Party as a matter of conscience. Could not be involved with any group that would condone, much less assist, that direct frontal attack on our civil liberties. Same thing with the so-called National Defense Authorization Act. We can't repeal it as such, but we'll sure go public and explain why it should be repealed and get Congress to repeal it. This is simply a blight on our soul. The soul of the United States of America is what?
our liberties and our freedoms, and our soul is under attack by our very own government, not under our administration. Drones, Guantanamo, we would very much strongly try to close, repeal the Patriot Act and the rest.
There's been a trend recently for a certain kind of legislation, like the Protect IP Act and the various internet legislation. How do you
The
think?
various what?
Internet legislation, like
Internet.
the Stop Online Piracy Act, which
Yes.
was just passed. What do you think about the criminal enforcement of copyright law?
You know, we feel that we do not believe in censorship. I still believe that downloading, if I am Elton John or something and you're downloading my songs is piracy, but I think that we've gotten beyond that, such that, you know, it's happening, and to some degree Apple was able, computers was able to address those things, but we do not believe in censorship. So as far as the internet is concerned, that's our answer. Anyone that does not ask a question yet? You? No,
I did ask.
You did. Yes.
I want to go back to the young lady's question about individual liberties, and particularly relating to, you know, oh, this is the year of the woman yet again. What, we only get 1 year? And maybe a little bit more about the platform belief of a woman's right to choose if we're going to go that route.
Okay. Both Governor Johnson and I are free choice. I personally believe that, as best I understand it, the fetus starts brain activity at about 26 weeks. Personally, that's where I would go. Whatever it would be, somewhere south of that. But this is not a federal issue. Roe versus Wade is the law of the land, but otherwise it is a state issue. We would not be involved with federal funding on this or almost anything else. Even, you know, I guess, was it Romney who was apologizing to Jim Lehrer and saying he wouldn't fund PBS and stuff. We wouldn't even, there's so much funding. We're going to have to reduce our budget, our spending by 43%. And so we're going to have to cut back a lot of spending. And that certainly includes one of them.
You gotta pay for a war budget?
We'll pay for a war budget, but we will.
I mean, the war budget we had are completely unfunded. They're
Oh.
not paid for, but
Okay,
everyone's got their checks
okay.
in the military. The Jets got their
Well,
check.
I'll change subject, I'll come back to that in a minute. But there's a lot of funding. We will have an audit of the federal government using generally accepted accounting principles. Never been happening before. Public companies are required by law to do that. We will do the same thing with the federal government, with the Pentagon, with all of the federal agencies. I happen to believe, we give them a chance, but I happen to believe that the Department of Education should not be in existence. So we're not going to cut everybody's budget by 43%. That's crazy. What we're going to do is eliminate programs and eliminate agencies, and that will be a large part of that. I happen, unlike Governor Perry, I can actually remember the agencies that I would do away with, and it would be the Department of Education, the Department of Commerce, the Department of Energy, maybe even the Bureau of Indian Affairs if I can get away with it. I mean, these are things that we would try to eliminate completely. With regard to the Pentagon, that would be part of the 43% as well. You see that audit, etc. Bringing home our troops from Afghanistan is going to save a whole bunch of money in addition to a whole bunch of lives. But, and as Ron Paul would say, there are some, we today, at this moment, have somewhere between 900 and 1,000 military bases, military reservations in foreign countries. If they're necessary for our security, terrific. Keep them there, reinforce them as far as I'm concerned. But I swear to you that we could eliminate 80% of those without even scratching our heads more than once. They're not necessary for our security. Germany is not going to be attacked by Austria in my lifetime. We have no reason to have tens of thousands of troops in Germany. Bring them home. I saw a magazine article about a woman who lives in a small town in Germany next to a U.S. Army base, and she was horrified. The idea, if you would leave this, move this base out of our town, we would lose 92% of our revenue. And you know something? She's probably right. But wouldn't it be better to spend this money in San Francisco or Las Vegas or Nebraska or wherever? Spend this money on our shores, not theirs. So that's a part of the 43% as well. We will look at these things. Yes, sir.
There's a lot of guns floating around. I was wondering your position on gun control.
I have said publicly many times, even before Libertarian conventions, I'm not a gun enthusiast. Okay, so it's coming from somebody that's not a gun enthusiast. Nevertheless, I believe that it's a question of responsibility and it's a question of freedom. Prohibitions don't work. And so, just like with guns, prohibitions don't work, responsibility does. That was an easy one. Yes?
Do you support student loan forgiveness?
Do I support student loan forgiveness?
I think there's a 10 for 10 plan floating through Congress right now. 10%
Okay.
in 10 years and your student loans.
I'm going to give you a long answer to that. Because, again, Obama is saying he is pandering to people, buying your votes. The students vote, and I agree, students, particularly in a school like this, they have student loans and they're worried about them, as well they should be. The problem is the United States government should not be involved in this at all. And Obama is buying your vote. Oh, those crass conservatives, they're going to bring your 3% loan and make it at standard rates of 6%. I'm going to keep them at 3%. Ah, poor baby. The problem with that is he is spending public money. There are lots and lots and lots of people in our country that are not in the privileged class that never went to college. They went to high school, they're working hard, they're paying their taxes, and I don't believe that they should have to pay for the privileged class people to go to school. I just don't believe so. And the problem with that, in addition, is that what happens, like in Medicare, like in Obamacare, whenever you have a third-party payer, where the consumer doesn't pay the money, it's paid for him or her, what happens? The prices go up. And I warrant to you that in all schools around the country, the tuition in the last 4 or 5 years has gone up, in large part because it isn't you as the consumers that are paying the tuition, it's done by your loans, so you're not as price sensitive as you should be. So that's again been caused by the government. How many here are students that have received an application for a credit card in the last 6 months? You're good risks. You're not employed, but you're still a good risk. You will still be able to get a student loan, and wouldn't it be better to pay 6% on a student loan of $15,000 as opposed to 3% on a student loan of $50,000? So you still get beat by this whole system. Having said all of that, being as it is, I think some programs for people that want to go into community service work and the rest is probably a nice idea to get some of our students in to forgive some of those student loans, even though it's contrary to my philosophy. To that degree, the answer is yes. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Where does the Libertarian Party stand with the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union? Are they almost always in agreement or not?
Well, first of all, I don't speak for the Libertarian Party any more than Romney speaks for the Republican Party. We believe in liberty. And I've spoken, in fact, it's amazing because I've been speaking out publicly against our nation's drug policy for 20 years now. And I've spoken to a lot of different groups. I've gotten a standing ovation for basically giving the same speech to the ACLU on the one hand and the Young Republicans of Orange County on the other. I mean, it's just amazing. It crosses all political boundaries. And when I speak with the ACLU people, I tell them the truth, which is, I don't agree with you probably 85 to 90% of the time. I just don't agree with you. I think you take positions that I just don't agree with, but I'm sure glad you're here. They do stand up for liberty, and it's really essential that we have groups like this in our society. With regard to drug policy, we're lockstep. You know, they understand this as well. Other things I don't agree with them, but I'm sure proud of them, and I'm glad that they're here. Yes?
If you don't agree with the student loan program, how would we be able to, like our labor markets, compete with foreign labor markets that do subsidize education, like with China and the European Union? Because they have massive amounts of engineers coming out of their schools on the same level of training with ours, you know, mathematicians, physicists, and so on.
Sure. The question is, if I don't agree with the federal government being involved in the student loan program, how are students here going to compete with other countries where they do have some substantial assistance, I guess, from the governments to come over here?
Not so much students, just the labor markets, like, because we won't have the same amount of engineers as those countries do.
Oh, okay. Now I don't agree with your premise. He's saying with the labor markets, because we won't have as many engineers as come out of other countries. I believe that if you want to be an engineer, what's the best investment you can make in yourself? Your own education. You'll be able to get these loans. You'll be able to have tuition lower, and you'll have that drive. Or if not, you don't come to this school, go to a community college. If you have the drive and you have the smarts, you'll make it. We'll have fully as many engineers. In fact, the tuition would be lower under my system. We'll probably have more engineers under that system than we do today. I don't buy your premise at all. I just think that the federal government should not be involved. The federal government makes a mess of things. You don't understand. Anytime the federal government is involved, it's not strings attached, it's ropes and chains to that money. And you've just got to get away from that. And that's part of the 43% as well. So the job market will be better. There's a demand for engineers. We're going to fill it. I just don't accept that. I think we're going to have fully as many as otherwise. Yes.
Even with your and Governor Johnson's more enlightened progressive drug policy, if violence in the Mexican border couldn't be stemmed even by that and it continues to deteriorate, would you support mobilizing federal troops to the Mexican border?
If we were elected president and we were to repeal the war on drugs, we were to bring back responsibility, treat marijuana like wine, which is an initiative we will have on the ballot in California in 2014, but still the Mexican violence was going on so strongly, or they were still bringing drugs into our country, would we use the troops on our border? The answer is it wouldn't happen. Because if we repeal drug prohibition, the market is not going to be here. Nobody's going to bring drugs into our country because there's no market. Today, I suggest to you that the Mexican drug cartels are not bringing bourbon into our country, are they?
No.
You know, why? Because there's no money in it. They could. Today, Mexican drug cartels are not planting illegal vineyards in our national forests in competition with Robert Mondavi either, are they? No. If they could, there's no money in it. So it's an academic question. The need would be gone.
So you and Governor Johnson would also legalize the hard drugs such as methamphetamines, heroin, cocaine?
Okay. First of all, and he asked, would I and Governor Johnson legalize the harder drugs as well? Methamphetamines, cocaine, heroin, etc. I wouldn't legalize anything. Would not legalize anything. Alcohol is not a legalized subject. And this isn't just quibbling with words. People need to understand these concepts. If you think a legalized drug, think aspirin. Your 12-year-old sister could go to any local pharmacy and could buy a crate of aspirin. It could be generic, it could be...
Not at the school nurse.
Excuse me?
Not at the school nurse.
Not in the... Okay. Any pharmacy and buy a crate of aspirin, no age restrictions, no nothing. That is a legalized drug. She can't do that with cigarettes. She can't do that with alcohol. She would not be able to do that. That is a legalized subject. We wouldn't do it. I would go to a program of a strictly regulated distribution where now you have some controls. That's what we do with cigarettes. That's what we do with alcohol. So, would I do that with regard to these other drugs as well? Let's start with marijuana. Find out what happens. I'm convinced I know what will happen, and then people will be ready to look at the other drugs. I don't know how much time you want me to take with this. There's going on in Switzerland today a magnificent project that is called, they actually prescribe, they find heroin addicted people, they bring them into their medical clinics, and they actually prescribe heroin for them at the amount of they get a blood test and figure out what their usage level is. They prescribe just enough to maintain them at that level. It's not enough to get that surge or whatever it would be called, but it's too much to have them go through withdrawal. It maintains them at their current level. They're able to work, they're able to lead normal lives, their employment's gone up by 50%, they're not burglarizing your house or my car and stuff to get the drugs. It's working wonderfully well. I would do that in a heartbeat and take away a lot of these problems in our society. And then let's look and see. The other drugs, I think, I would allow each state to decide how best to serve it. When we finally came to our senses and repealed alcohol prohibition, we did not say that Nevada or Nebraska or New Jersey will serve alcohol. All we said is the federal government's role now is restricted to assisting each state in enforcing its chosen laws. And that's what we should do with regard to these other drugs as well. So Governor Johnson and I are not going to be doing that other than leaving it to the states, and then the concept of federalism will work. And we'll figure out what works well in one state or what works well in another, kind of like Romney was talking about with regard to health care. That's the concept of federalism. That's where we would go. Okay? Yes?
You stated that you oppose the death penalty?
Yes.
And that you would want to see it shifted towards life without parole sentences?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
And that you would want to see it shifted towards life without parole. What about juvenile offenders who are now serving life sentences, de facto life sentences?
What about juveniles that are serving life sentences? I think it's unconscionable. That's not, I think that they should certainly be held accountable. Most sociologist studies will show you that it's mostly the biggest people in our society that are committing violent offenses are males between about the age of 18 and 28. And Sometimes regretfully now it's becoming younger too with the juvenile gangs and the rest of that sort of stuff. But you can talk to almost any prison warden and it's demonstrable that eventually these guys, as they grow older, will just, as they call it, lie down. They're just tired of the hassle. And eventually they'll just be compliant with the rules in the prison and they just change. And a juvenile's brain is not yet developed. In fact, in males, who knows when it develops, but it's simply unconscionable to have a death penalty for a juvenile. It's unconscionable to have a life without possibility of parole for a juvenile. I believe that the Supreme Court will be in accord on that. After that, it's an individual case, but they should have an option and availability. Yes, some juveniles have committed some very heinous offenses, but the answer, I think I've answered your question. Yes, I love your taste in shirts. Why don't you stand up and show off? Huh? What about
I wish I had more to give out when we're all out.
Governor Gary Johnson, he's sure my man. Yes.
I was wondering if you
I'll make
could.
you stand up again.
I was wondering if you could go into a little detail on you and Governor Johnson's view on immigration. How does that differ from Obama and Romney, if at all? And second question, if you have time, is if you guys don't get into the debates, I know you have a lawsuit, anti-monopoly lawsuit to get into debates, which I think is awesome, but if you don't, and we don't see the numbers rising to make you competitive this year, why should people still vote for you? Is there any reason?
Thank you. First question is, what's our view with regard to immigration? I've actually written a book that includes pretty much all of the subjects we've talked about. It was published in 2010 called A Voter's Handbook, Effective Solutions to America's Problems. And it's amazing. I had no concept that I'd be running for office, but these are things that I believe. And it's amazing how much Governor Johnson and I are in accord on various things. And in the introduction to my book, I say, I will discuss immigration. It will be the last chapter, and it will be the shortest, because it's the easiest problem to resolve. These problems could have been resolved decades ago. But the problem is the Republicans and Democrats don't want to. They give it lip service, but they don't want to. Why? Because many, many powerful Republicans love the idea of cheap labor, and so they don't want to change the system. And a lot of very powerful Democrats love the idea of all these people coming into our country eventually voting for Democrats. If they wanted to fix it, they could. What we would do is we would issue work visas to people pretty liberally. Anyone that wants to come into our country, we'd have a background check, make sure that they have a criminal background, and they're not mentally ill or whatever, make sure that they'd be able to actually take care of themselves, and we would allow them to come into our country with that work visa. That means they can actually come in the front door. You don't need the coyotes, you don't need all the top violence and everything else. Then they could also get a driver's license, they could get a Social Security card, and then you punish the companies that hire anybody that isn't a citizen, green card, or work visa. And the problem will pretty much go away. If they in fact can show they can support their families, they can bring their families too. No welfare, they're not entitled to welfare, certainly schooling and the rest of that, but otherwise that's what we would do. In addition to that, we would say that anybody would give a grace period of, I don't know, 6 months, whatever it would be, and then anybody that is here that is not lawful in that way, once they're found, would never be able to come back to the United States. Now you look at Obama, again, pandering to people. Obama administration has deported more people already than the Bush administration did in 8 years. And now he's saying, oh, poor baby, now we're going to decide that anybody that was brought here as a child, you've heard it, brought here as a child, we're not going to deport them. If he really believed that, he would have done that at the beginning. I don't know what Obama believes. He's pandering to the voters. We say, as long as you abide by this circumstance, we will get the whole system under control, because today what's happening, millions of people are being harmed. And I never get upset. I don't call them illegal immigrants. I think that's a disgusting term. People are not illegal. Well, you call them undocumented workers, but they're just doing the same thing that our ancestors did. They're coming here to have a better life, coming here for a better life for their families as well. And I admire them. But we've got to bring this thing under the law, and this is what we would do. The second part of your question is really interesting. If we're not a part of the debates, we're not going to win the election. That's just my belief. I think that's fairly straightforward. If we are a part of these debates, the next one is a week from tomorrow in Kentucky for the vice presidents. We're still trying to get me in there. We'll be filing a lawsuit in Kentucky soon. Whether it works or not, I hope it does, but we'll see. But if for some reason we do not get into debates, I still believe that the most educated, the most powerful vote that you can give would be for Governor Gary Johnson and Judge Jim Gray. Why? All kinds of reasons. First of all, isn't it better to vote in favor of someone than against someone? And I really believe that today, more than half of the people that are planning on putting an X by Obama's name in the election are really voting against Romney. And more than half of the people who are planning an X on Romney's name are just voting against Obama. And I think, that's really sad. Vote for someone. Governor Gary Johnson is the guy. Secondly, if you're a Democrat and Obama just doesn't represent you, it's a wasted vote to vote for somebody that you don't agree with, because then you're telling the Democratic Party this type of candidate's acceptable. Same deal if you're a Republican voting for Romney. If he doesn't represent you, same deal. You're telling the Republican Party that this is acceptable. So vote in favor of someone. And finally, and the big trump card is, at fallback position, I told you we're running to win, and we are. But as a default position, if we just get 5% of the vote in this election, we will be able to, in 2016, be entitled to matching funds from the federal government, like the Republicans and Democrats are now. We won't have to jump through, as Libertarians, all of these hoops to get on the ballot in any state. As long as we get 5% or more, we'll be on the ballot with having to file all these petitions and have all of these lawsuits and everything else. It will be the beginning of the end of the two-party system. And that will require the more radical extremes on both the Republicans and Democrats to come more toward the center. Because we are in the center. We are the only ones that are in the main philosophy, political philosophy of the voters today. We are both financially responsible and socially tolerant. No one will accuse Obama of being financially responsible. No one will accuse Romney of being socially tolerant. We are both. So vote for us. This will be historic. It will be the beginning of the end of the two-party system. And I think that your votes will really count. So one way or the other, I think that Governor Gary Johnson is the way to go. I like your taste in T-shirts too.
Thank you. What other strategies, do you have any specific campaign strategies for publicity, for getting out there? Because the problem right now is getting noticed and getting legitimacy.
It certainly is. What is our strategy with regard to getting our word out there? We are in buys all around the nation now with regard to our radio ads. They're certainly in Southern California. Have you heard any here? I don't know. How many of you have seen any of ours, at least on YouTube or something like that, with our TV ads? Not enough. Please go to our website, GaryJohnson2012.com. They're brilliant, they're wonderful, and they're actually truthful. Amazing as that sounds. Our ads are sensational. So we do have some money. We are spending that money to in the various media places. More in the swing states, of course, but certainly Colorado, Washington, and Oregon, we are spreading the word a lot because initiatives there to treat marijuana like alcohol, that's right in our wheelhouse. Obama and Romney, or as I say again, Romney are on one side, we're on the other. So we are pushing this, and we are getting our word out. We've started these buys, and particularly with radio already. Television is more expensive, but that's what we're doing. And of course, Governor Johnson and I volunteered to be out on the road the rest of the time until the election, and I'm afraid that my scheduler took me up on it. I'm pretty much gone. Yes?
As a follow-up to his question, I'm going to take a moment to give a plug here. If you support your local Libertarian Party, give us a call. We're always looking for volunteers to hand out flyers, help us fill places like these, just get the word out. I mean, at the end of the day, Gary Johnson and Judge Jim Gray have $1 billion, and there's no one around to actually give it to and work through, then it's just $1 billion sitting in the bank. And, we need boots on the ground desperately to make phone calls, write letters to the editor, get flyers on the door, knock on doors, get in touch with people, and just let your friends and family know, hey, this is who I'm voting for, and this is why. So
It
please.
really does matter. The Libertarians, we do care about people. We will have a safety net. But what we do actually works. It's not all that warm and fuzzy. It's not all that poor baby, and the government will take. Government's the last resort instead of the first resort. But we are there. We're up and coming, and our country needs us. Yes?
Yeah, would you please give us an idea what kind of nuclear weapons strategy we could expect under the Johnson administration?
Yes, what kind of nuclear weapons strategy do we have under the Johnson-Gray administration? I think, and I've heard the governor say this, we really do have too many nuclear weapons, and we would reduce that stockpile. And it's not related to what Russia has or other people have. Already we have so many, it's very expensive. You have to maintain them, you have to keep security on them. We will keep enough to keep for whatever we need. Other than that, I'm over my head. I start talking to military experts. You know, I'm a generalist. As a judge, I rely upon gathering information, weighing, making decisions, and then, of course, explaining the decisions. But we will talk to people with an eye toward, not out of weakness, but out what's necessary and what isn't. We would reduce those nuclear weapons. Okay? Yes. Last question, and then we'll go on.
My question actually builds off of that. It's
Good.
about how you feel about nuclear proliferation and whether you would, under Gary Johnson, the United States would come out against places like Iran and countries that are seeking, or quote-unquote seeking nuclear weapons.
Yes, I think I mentioned Iran before. I'm concerned about Iran getting nuclear weapons. I'm disastrously concerned about Ahmadinejad, who's a screw-loose guy, although he's not in charge of the company, really, the country. It really is Ayatollah. But, you know, North Korea has nuclear weapons, and they're screw-loose too, you know, all this sort of stuff. They know, even in that screw-looseness, that if they were to get close to using them, they'd be annihilated, and nobody wants to be annihilated. By the way, Pakistan has nuclear weapons. Talk about a destabilized country. So we are not going to bomb anybody. We're not going to attack anybody, including Iran. We would continue with sanctions, which are basically really punishing the Iranian people. But I think they're becoming effective. And so we would do that, but we're not going to bomb anybody, regardless, unless they attack us first or our allies. So that's where we are with regard to that. I personally, and here I don't know what Governor Johnson feels, but I personally believe that nuclear energy is really still a good thing. I saw what happened, of course, at Fukushima in Japan, but their technology was behind ours. We need to be careful, we need to be safe, but you know, there are some risks in this world. Coal is dirt, you know. But I think we should continue to look into nuclear reactors for safety. But with that, I'm going to end by making one comment. Thomas Jefferson, hero of mine, maybe you've heard of the fellow. After the Constitution of the United States was ratified, he wrote back from France and said, congratulations, however, in a fragile democracy, in a fragile republic, you're going to have a revolution every generation. Why? To keep those private interests, those special interests from invigorating their way into power, sapping our vitality, sapping our strength. How many generations has it been since Thomas Jefferson made those comments? And I am really proud, humbled, excited to say that at long last, I believe this revolution is here. And it takes the form of Governor Gary Johnson and Judge Jim Gray. I think that we're the most qualified people by virtue of our intellect, by virtue of our background. You know, Governor Johnson has a background in running a company. He has more administrative experience than both Romney and Obama combined. And again, this whole approach of good government is easy, watch, he's done it. And I believe I am more qualified too than any of the other people running. I believe that we can come in and help. We put in this coalition government, we will work for you. If you get Republicans in, all these hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars that are being spent, and there's a string attached to every nickel. And people are going to expect payback once that election is over by those special interests. We're going to be responding to you. And I believe that we are here. I believe that we can help. I believe that we will help. And now it's going to be up to you. So thank you for sharing the evening with us. Appreciate your interest. Appreciate your attention. Good luck to us all.